tight elbows out racing, late race safety cars, and leaders crashing out. Yeah, the Chevrolet Grand Prix sure gave us plenty of action. So let's talk about it. This is your Canadian Tire Motorsport Park post-race report. For the second year in a row, the LMP2's headlines the IMSA weekend north of the border at Canadian Tire Motorsport Park. And once again, we had plenty of on-track action. Before the race even got underway on Sunday, we had some weather uncertainty to deal with. There was a large cell that moved through, absolutely downpour on the track. It did dry up though in time for the race, but this left us with a very hot and muggy start to the race. And all things considered, especially for CTMP, a track that is generally very tight, has produced a fair number of full course yellows in recent years, we did see a surprisingly calm opening couple of hours of this race. In fact, the only true crash that we saw, apart from a couple of spins, was for the 04 CrowdStrike Racing LMP2 that had a pretty nasty off here in turn 3. Now, as for the on-track racing LMP2, I know it's not the most popular class in IMSA. That probably safely goes to the GTPs, but I think it's often underrated the quality of racing that we see in the class, and this race delivered and showcased some of the great racing that we can see. In the class, we saw PJ Hyatt put that car on pole for the second year in a row. Of course, last year he picked up a penalty before they even reached turn 1 that kind of derailed their race efforts, but that wasn't the case this year. PJ put on a masterclass in the first stint of that race, built out a 15-20 second lead in the opening stint, and was the clear class of the competition when it came to the bronze starting drivers. And then who gets in the car when PJ gets out? Well, that's Dane Cameron, a pretty darn good driver in his own right. Needless to say, for most of this race, that 99 AO Racing entry looked like the class of the P2 field, but they did get challenges throughout the race from cars like the 22 United Autosport entry. The 74 Riley once again had a solid weekend here. But it was the 43 Inter-Europol entry that looked to really bring the fight to them, especially when Tom Dillman was in the car in the second half of this race. As the race wound down, Tom Dillman would end up taking the LMP2 class lead, and after one of those late race full course yellows that came out, Tom would lead us back to green. I believe it was the second lap after the restart, and once again going into the high-speed turn 3, Tom Dillman had some sort of a mechanical issue, and that 43 car went off into the tire barriers hard. You could see Tom pop the door open on that car very quickly after the car went into the wall. It almost looks like he's struggling to get out of the car. Now, it took a while to get Tom out of the car, and Tom would later have to be taken to hospital. He would later post on social media that he was doing okay, he's just going to need some time to recover from the injury, but he will be back. So that is positive news to hear. Back to the on-track racing, though, and unfortunately, this lengthy full course yellow, the full course yellow came out with about 15 or so minutes to go, I believe, and with that little time remaining in the race, they weren't able to get the car and importantly the driver safely extracted in time, so the race would end under full course yellow. So for the second year in a row, the race would end under full course yellow, but it will not be the second straight win for an Inter-Europol liveried car, I guess, in this race. They won here last year in conjunction with PR1, but this year it was the 99 AO Racing entry of Spike, driven by PJ Hyatt and Dane Cameron, that they put on a great race and they came out with the win. They came out ahead of the 22 United Autosport entry, a solid race in their own right, and the 74 Riley, who recovered after being caught up in a small incident earlier in the race to finish third. As we've come to expect as well, GTD Pro put on a great show for us again. We saw a variety of manufacturers in the hunt here. BMW looked strong in the early going as they led the first stint, but they would ultimately lose some track position in a pit stop. Lexus looked really strong all weekend, which at this point should come as no surprise. And Porsche with AO Racing, we talk about cars that are no surprise to see them at the front. They once again found themselves in the hunt here at the end of the race. Oh yeah, and then there's Corvette, after their dominant performance here last year. We knew they were going to be strong coming into the weekend. They were lingering around there, didn't show that same dominance that they showed last year, but definitely cars to contend with in this one. However, in the end, it was another strong race from Dragon Speed in their Ferrari as they found themselves in the hunt for most of this race and would ultimately be the ones to bring it home for the GTD Pro win. Albert Costa and Giacomo Alto drove their 81 Ferrari to the win ahead of the number 4 Corvette and number 77 AO Racing Porsche. Of course, they weren't the only GTD class on the grid, though. Overall, I'd say both of the GTD classes were a pleasure to watch. We just talked about the Pro, so let's talk about regular GTD now. And I feel like this class really shone through in the second half of the race. They had some good battles leading up to it, much like the GTD Pro class. You know, they had cars that were kind of coming and going. We saw different cars up at the front. We saw the 78 Forte Racing Lamborghini that was in the hunt. We had the 45 Lamborghini as well. Lamborghini, I should add here, I don't think anybody really expected them to be super strong here this weekend. They had a BOP hit at the beginning of the weekend, and speaking to some of the teams there, none of them were really expecting that they were going to be all that strong in this race, but I think they turned out to do pretty well, obviously, as we'll touch on in a second, but I also think that they did a really good job with their fuel strategy, and fuel strategy is what came down to be the real deciding factor in GTD. Now, you might recall back to the race preview from last week that CTMP, one of the key race characteristics is we're going to get late full course yellows. The last 3 races, we've had a full course yellow within the last 26 minutes of the race. This year made it 4 years in a row. And when push came to shove, Wayne Taylor Racing was the team that played this to perfection in GTD, as I whack the mic. They rolled the dice on fuel strategy, and after a late race yellow, were able to hold on for the GTD win. This was a huge breakthrough win for Danny Formal and Trent Hindman, who drove their number 45 Wayne Taylor Racing Lamborghini to the win. They beat out the number 57 Windward Racing Mercedes and the number 12 Vassar Sullivan Lexus. Now, if you're like me, you've probably found yourself at the racetrack with your camera wondering how the pros make their shots look so great while yours don't. If this is you, then check out Paddock Focus Photography Workshops. You're already familiar with the great work that Paddock Focus co-host Jamie Price puts out. You see his work right here all the time on the channel. Now, you can learn from him and fellow photographer Drew Gibson right in the comfort of your home. Whether it's things like best spots to shoot with your general admission ticket or how to become a motorsport photographer, Drew and Jamie cover it. For Off in the S's viewers, Paddock Focus is offering 10% off any of their workshops when you use promo code S's. That's promo code S's at paddockfocus.teachable.com or click the first link in the description. Thanks to Paddock Focus for supporting the show. We also had some Sports Series action this weekend, including the Michelin Pilot Challenge. The 2-hour race featured the GS and TCR cars, and in the GS class it was the 39 Carbon with Peregrine Racing BMW of Stephen McAleer and Jeff Westphal taking the win. They beat out the 27 Autotechnic Racing BMW, and rounding out the podium was the 19 Stephen Cameron Racing Ford. With an eye on the championship here and RS1 finishing a little bit further down the grid, it does mean that Carbon's starting to close up the championship gap that RS1 has. It's now down to just 260 points. I do also want to make note of a very hard crash that we saw here in the Michelin Pilot Challenge. A couple of GS cars, some TCR cars got tangled up on the long Mario Andretti straightaway. There was a couple hard hits for the Turner Motorsport car. One of the Baker Racing cars also had a very hard hit. I believe that James Vance had a bit of a rough ride throughout that. I saw some social media posts. He is going to be okay though. I just wanted to point out this very hard crash that we saw in the Michelin Pilot Challenge race. There were also the TCRs, as I mentioned, and here was the 93 Montreal Motorsport Group Honda of Carl Whitmer and LP Montour that took the win in TCR. They beat out the 99 Victor Gonzalez Racing Hyundai, and rounding out the podium, the number 7 Precision Racing LA Audi. TCR Championship is very, very tight here as well. The top two are tied now between the 98 Brian Herta and the number 76 Brian Herta Autosport Hyundai. The VP Sports Car Challenge was also present at CTMP. They unfortunately had their second race canceled. I mentioned earlier some of that weather that blew flew through pre-race on Sunday that unfortunately led to the initial delay and later cancellation of the second VP Sports Car Challenge race, but they did get to race on Saturday for their one race of the weekend, and in the LMP3 class it was Valentino Catalano that took the win there. Meanwhile, in GTDX, it was Jake Walker that took the win. And in GSX, it was Kirko Porto in the Rafa Racing Toyota that took the win. The Whelen Mazda MX-5 Cup cars also were present and certainly put on a show this weekend. In race 1, it was Tyler Gonzalez, Helio Meza, and Gresham Wagner on the podium, with the top finishing female of Ashlyn Speed in 15th. And in race 2, it was Gresham Wagner picking up the win. Jeremy Fletcher and Nate Cicero rounded out the podium, with the top finishing female of Sally Mott in 12th. Let's take a look at the championship standings now, presented by P1 Web Development. If you're a race driver, team, chassis builder, or engine shop who takes racing seriously, but your online presence is an afterthought, you're leaving money on the table. P1 builds sites that get you noticed, get you sponsors, and get your business taken seriously. Go check out the new P1 website at p1webdevelopment.com. In LMP2, it's number 22 United Auto Sports car that leads here with 1,375 points. That's a 78-point advantage over this weekend's winner, the number 99 AO Racing entry. The 74 Riley, 43 Inter Europol, and 04 CrowdStrike entries all round out the top 5. In GTD Pro, it's number 3 Corvette by Pratt Miller Motorsports Corvette that continues to lead with 1,942 points. That's a 39-point advantage over the 77 AO Racing Porsche. The 81 Dragon Speed, this weekend's winner, is 53 points back. The 48 Paul Miller Racing BMW is 186 points back, and the 64 Ford Mustang rounds out your top 5. In GTD, the number 57 Windward Racing Mercedes leads with 1,902 points. It's a 93-point advantage over the number 12 Vassar Sullivan Lexus. The 27 Heart of Racing Aston Martin, 120 Wright Motorsports Porsche, and 96 Turner Motorsports BMW round out your top 5. Now, some overall thoughts from the race weekend. It's a couple days after now that the race is being run, so I got to take a look at some of the polls and see some of the comments of what you guys thought, and generally speaking, I think I agree with many of you. I'd say it was a solid race. It was fun to watch those LMP2s put on a show, and the other classes as well. GTD Pro put on a good show. We saw some good battles in GTD as well. The one thing that everybody seems to want is, of course, the GTPs to come back, which I don't know if that's overly likely that we're going to see that in the next couple of years. We can always still hope, but looking at what we did have on the grid this weekend, we saw some good racing. CTMP is a tricky track to pass at. It's a bit of a unique one. It's so high speed and so flowing. It can be tricky to make some of those passes, but we did see passing this weekend. We saw some good battles, and unfortunately we for the second year in a row got robbed of, you know, that race to the finish with the, you know, as we finished under full course yellow. But the battles that we saw between, you know, Dane Cameron and Tom Dillman in LMP2, between the Ferrari, the Corvette, you know, the BMW was up there, Rexy was up there in GTD Pro. We saw those good battles this weekend. I'd say overall a solid weekend. We did also get some big news coming out about the future of BMW in the GTP class. I'm going to touch on that in a future video, so keep your eyes peeled for that. But until then, you can check out this video where I recap all of the IMSA news from the month of June. Huge shout out to all the channel supporters. If you too want to support the show, you can head to patreon.com/offintheesses or click that join button below. Once again, though, thanks for tuning in. I hope everyone has a great race weekend and doesn't go off in the S's.